welcome to the first ever BD Roundtable that's going to be hosted in the European time zone. I am Simon Marshall and I work at a little agency called TBD Marketing. Will McLaughlin has kindly asked me to host and look after the kind of European end of things. And so this is the first opportunity to take on the baton from what he's already built. He's got 282 members globally who already dial in from up to 28 countries on a weekly basis to hear about the great things they should be doing in law firm, professional services, marketing. And so, yeah, thanks to Will for asking me to do this. And we're really looking forward to today's session. Today, I'm joined by one of my favorite people on LinkedIn, David Sayce, who's a real expert on SEO and all matters pertaining to kind of Google's algorithms. So we're going to pick his brain today about some upcoming changes. So David, would you mind just giving us a quick introduction about yourself?
Sure. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, by the way. That was very nice. So yeah, my name's David Sayce. I'm a digital marketing consultant based here in London and director of Paper Gecko. I spent a lot of time running audits and doing SEO projects with a number of different types of firms, but historically I was head of digital with one of the big London law firms for about 6-7 years, helping them drive their digital forward.
Thanks for that. That's great. I think there's something that's at the front of everyone's mind at the minute. And today's session we structured, hopefully, to have something of an introduction at the front end to some ideas and some concepts, and then get really into some detail of some upcoming changes and how it's going to affect people a bit later on. So ideally, it would be 15 to 20 minutes. Who knows? If we get into the detail, we get lost. I know that you and I love to chat about the ins and outs of this stuff, so we'll see how we go. But could you tell, just for anyone watching who doesn't really know how the algorithm works, can you tell us, maybe start out by telling us, what kind of percentages would we expect for different rankings on page one of Google? I'm thinking maybe desktop, maybe mobile, maybe both if you've got them.
So if you're talking about your position within the search engine results page, I mean, there's the old saying that the best place to hide a dead body is page 2, and that does hold true to some extent. I mean, what we see through the evidence that we've collected is that when you're hitting the top 1, 2, 3 position within Google search, you're looking at the click-through rate, the percentage of people coming through from that search onto your website, to be anywhere between about 20 to 35%. Now, as you drop down that first page, it drops down pretty significantly. When you get down to the bottom of page 1, you're probably looking at that click-through rate running at about 1.5 to 3%. There's a little jump when you go on to page 2, maybe around the 3%, but after that you are looking at 1%, 1.5% after that. So it really is important to make sure your visibility across whatever the search terms are is really as high as it can be.
So being on page 1 is great. And it's really important, especially with regards to those areas that are hard to ranking. But then climbing those rankings presumably must be incredibly hard.
It can be. I mean, it really does depend on the competitiveness of those keywords, those key phrases that you're looking at. It used to be with SEO that we'd look at individual words. These days, it's much more about the intent of the searcher. So having a look at the questions that they're asking, we're seeing most searches being around 3, 4, 5 words. So people are really diving in. And this produces what we call a long tail search. So people putting in 3 or 4 words to try and find out more about that topic, have that question answered as best as possible.
Okay, and just before we get into the meat of kind of Web Vitals and what's coming from Google, tell us why do you, that aside, why is it so important now, do you think? Why is SEO, Google rankings, digital marketing, why is it so important now?
I think we've got 2 sides to that. I think we've got the user side. I mean, we're seeing in the middle of, or possibly towards the end of COVID, seeing online activity absolutely booming. It is one of the key methods that people are going to discover a brand, discover a business. I think it's also a good time now for businesses to really be looking at how their websites are functioning. Google is continuing to get smarter, as we'll see with Core Web Vitals. It's very much about that user experience online. So now is the time really to start diving into the digital and understand how your brand is performing online.
And if there were, let's say for the people who are on the call who are watching the video afterwards, who really don't feel as digital has been a mainstay or a big part of their job until now, what would you say to them to convince them that they need to kind of take it on board and
Yeah, it's the way it's all moving. We're hearing studies coming through from the likes of Boston Consulting Group and other advisory firms that, a lot of businesses, their digital transformation projects, they're being moved forward 2, 3 years, and it really is about that competitive advantage. If a firm, a business is not going to start taking digital seriously, then they have the risk of losing out to competitors.
it seems to be quite hard for people to think about that skill set, as it were, as well. It's something that worries people about. They wouldn't know where to get going. Any thoughts or tips on that?
I think it's vital that from the marketing point of view, that's generally where the digital side sits. But you need to make sure that whoever is going to take on digital there isn't siloed within that department. They need to work across partners. They need to work across IT. In the past, with my experience in-house, working with financial and HR as well has proved to be very beneficial. I think it's also vital that, there are core people who understand these digital areas, much as you would have a specialist for graphic design. I think it's absolutely vital to have somebody looking after email marketing, content, and SEO as well. For the smaller firms or those just getting started, hiring in a consultant, a contractor is also a great option. It gives you that new set of eyes. They can often run checks across the website and really give you that kickstart to get things moving.
Okay, that's really useful, and hopefully you'll have piqued everyone's interest for the second part then. So let's look at what Google is calling Web Vitals, right? There are these three elements. Can you talk, firstly, just tell us what are Web Vitals? What does that actually mean, that phrase?
So the Web Vitals, they've been around for a while. There's the three that we're going to be talking about today, and these three join the existing Web Vitals family, and they're much more the technical side of website development, but they pair that with the usability as well, which is where it gets very interesting. So people will be much more aware of using websites on mobile devices. We had a big update a few years ago with Google making sure websites were friendly to the tablets, to the phones. Safety and security as well. So safe browsing and HTTPS formed part of the original the original Web Vitals. And the other one is the non-intrusive interstitials, which basically is pop-ups. So Google became very clear that, they don't want things popping up on the screen that are impeding the progress of the user on the website.
So that's the kind of history a bit of where
Yeah,
we've come from with Google, and those are sort of things those things are well underway. Mobilegeddon that you mentioned is probably what 5, 6 years ago now,
yeah.
and those things. But the new statistics that are being added to that family, can you just tell us what those three statistics are that are being added to the family?
Sure. So the three new ones, interestingly, Google announced these about 4 months ago now, and they've actually given us time to get websites in order, which is great. That doesn't always happen, especially with most algorithmic changes. So what we're looking at now is interactivity, which they call the first input delay. Loading of websites, which is the largest contentful paint, and visual stability, which is the cumulative layout shift. They don't make it easy.
Okay. Should we
But
deal with
those,
those in layman's terms, right? So
so
let's deal
it's
with each one
basically,
of them.
yeah,
So
so
the
it, sorry, it's basically it's interactivity, loading and visual stability of a website.
okay, let's expand a bit on interactivity. So I guess that's something to do with when I can use the page.
Yeah, so this is to do with how things, and very much the back end. Again, it's that mix between the technical of the back end to the user on the website. So as the web page loads up, you're not just getting the text, the design, the images. There's a whole load of scripts and code happening behind the scenes, and all of those take time to load up. So with the interactivity part, the first input delay, what that talks about is how quickly can somebody press on a button and have it do something.
Right.
So whether that's a read more button or to go on to read a partner's bio, what sometimes happens is with the amount of scripts running behind the website, a user will press on that button and there may be a short delay. And that's what Google is wanting people to get rid of. Make the website more efficient so when people are seeing those buttons, they're clickable as soon as possible.
Because they know from their statistics that when that isn't the case and that button's not ready to be pressed, what happens?
It impacts the usability of the website. I mean, as you can imagine, I mean, with all of these, it's very much about the frustrations that actually we've had with websites, probably especially over the last few years, 5 years, 6 years, as technologies and websites have grown.
Yeah.
And broadband has also played a part in that. Things have got faster. In some ways, the development of websites has become a little bit lazy. So it's making sure things happen as best as possible. We're talking about some speeds here in milliseconds and some in seconds, but it doesn't take very long at all for somebody to be aware that a button press isn't happening,
Yeah.
or a page is taking too long to load up.
Yeah.
With button presses, it's probably something like about 200-300 milliseconds, something like that. Yeah, it's almost blink of an eye. And if there isn't a response from that page there, people start to wonder what's going on. And for the most part, if a website is holding you back from simply using it, you're going to go elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I'd understood that the drop-off rate, the rate at which people then leave the site, it goes up massively after the first couple of
Yeah,
seconds.
yeah.
So Google has modeled these three statistics
I
to
mean,
kind of,
we've seen historically the evidence of just simple page speed loads that, after about 2-3 seconds, the percentage of people that just try a different website altogether
yeah,
drops dramatically.
yeah.
People have a very, very small tolerance for the websites.
Okay, I really like that, and that's in the middle statistic, the largest content paint.
Well, yeah, it happens on both. The time delays will impact both on a page loading up
Right.
across a website, but also on the individual navigation through a website. So especially you think of professional services, law firms, they often have these fabulous menu structures along the top. A lot of the times they're delivered via JavaScript. So if there's a slowness in how those are dropping down and sometimes moving across when they open up, it's going to slow down and 9 times out of 10, it's going to infuriate the user, and they'll just want to go somewhere easier for the answers.
Okay, and then the third statistic, tell us a bit more about that.
So sorry, we got so that was around first input delay.
Yeah.
Largest contentful paint also comes into that sort of element, and that's the page side of it. So this is where most of the time it will be down to the image itself. I know business services, law firms love a good big hero image on those pages. And most of the time, those will be the largest singular area of the website. Although sometimes it can actually be text blocks as well. So it's something to investigate. But with content for Paint, it's about how quickly that loads up, how ready the website is for use.
What can people actually do about those images? So, you know, partners, they do want something that's, I mean, my experience of working in law firms, it's because people stare at words all day. And so suddenly you give them an opportunity to have a look at some images, you know, people are going to grasp that opportunity. So what conversation do people need to have around kind of those? Is there anything they can do about it to speed up times? Or
I think, you know, this comes under, if you're not running regular checks, at least running frequent audits across the website,
right,
down to page level. A lot of the time, what I see in a lot of the audits that I do is issues with the images themselves just not being optimized. Now, websites these days will do optimization on the fly.
right,
So you can almost throw anything into the CMS, the content management system, and it will output a scaled version. However, all of that takes time behind the scenes. So with any development, I always suggest everything is as optimized as it can be beforehand. So understanding the size of that image on the screen, making sure it's scaled correctly, and then making sure that the physical size, kilobytes of the image, is set so it runs as smoothly as possible.
okay. So people,
I,
they can actually literally serve different size images for mobile,
yeah,
tablet,
yeah,
and
that
desktop
can
as
easily
well.
be done. But I think even when they're putting these images onto the website, it's important to think about how the largest size that image will be online and scaling to that image. I think one of my favorite examples was with a law firm that will remain nameless. They just had some fabulous pictures done of the partners, and beautifully done. They had the files through from the photographer, and they pretty much loaded them up straight from the photographer's files. So each of these thumbnail images was actually about, I think it was about 1.5 megabytes, when it could have easily been about 30 kilobytes. And that had actually a huge impact on the website. It impacted usability, and it also impacted ranking as well.
Yeah. Okay. That's really good to know. Any more for us on those statistics? There was a
So
third
there's the
statistic
third
as
one,
well.
and this is
Yeah.
this is the visual stability.
Right.
And I have to say, for me, this is actually the one I find most interesting. It's
Mhm.
it's my favorite one, mainly because I've seen this so often across so many websites. And this is about how websites have a habit sometimes of jumping around. It often happens when you have, sometimes it's the big hero images, sometimes it's advertising, or other elements similar to that on a web page. And what happens is often those are fed in last as the page builds up behind the scenes. And the infuriating part is you're just about to press on that button and the page starts to jump down because it hadn't quite finished loading up. As I say, this is most often seen with images and advertising,
Mhm.
but it's about how the page is physically laid out. So this is the cumulative layout shift. And the idea is that as the page loads up, it doesn't start jumping around as it loads. Your page needs to load fast. It needs to load clearly. Um, and this is one of my favorites. It's one that I still see a lot of.
I've seen it. There is an example, I think, on the Web Vitals page. If anyone gets the opportunity, I think you should go and have a look at that web.dev page, because it will give you an example there. But it shows an example where you try to buy something and the button shifts at the last minute, and or maybe it's an opt-in for an email and you go to press no and it shifts to yes instead. And I understood from reading what's there that Google had basically said the statistics tell us that people just drop off the site immediately if that happens to them. So it's got to stop. And that's why they're punishing it so heavily. Now, my question for you is that a lot of the people that we deal with, of course, are working commercial corporate law firms. And what we're talking about there is an example that's, well, maybe not the email one, but really is a consumer focused issue. So we do think it's an issue, though, for professional services firms.
I think so still. I mean, outside of, I think one of my favorite examples on the commercial side are often the magazine and news websites where the advertising headers pop in at the last moment.
Yeah,
I think for professional services, B2B firms, what we're looking at here is some of those images. So going back again to partner pages, and especially on mobile devices,
yeah,
you will often have the structure of the page change anyway to fit a mobile device. And it often starts with their name, an image of who the partner is, and then information at the bottom. And it's when that image loads in afterwards and it starts dropping that all important phone number, that email that you want to click on, off to the bottom of the page. And I know for myself as a user, if I have a website and that happens once, I might forgive it. 2 or 3 times, and I'll be honest, I'm off that website. And it's interesting because it's something that is actually quite an easy fix, and it's something that I think we used to be more aware of years ago in web development. Something that's often been forgotten, and that's simply setting out the anchor points of the page, making sure that you say, this website has an image, it's so big and so wide, and you're basically feeding that information into the website before the image even loads up. It saves a placeholder to say, in this spot here will be a 500 by 300 pixel image. Make sure you save the space. It's coming in a moment. And that way you don't get the page jumping around.
yeah.
The parking spot is saved and you're ready for that image to load up.
And I think from my end, the things that I've seen is in anything in a law firm, when you work in the marketing team, you've obviously got a very highly intelligent workforce, people with lots of opinions throughout the partnership and beyond as well. And actually, when you say the things that you're saying about these statistics, they don't sound like they're adding up to much. 2 seconds here or a second there, and it feels like something we can say, well, let's just do it the way we're going to do it because that looks the way I want it to. But I think using data to show people, will actually look, if we tweak this thing, then our rankings go up and more people actually spend more time on the page. That's
And I think you've got something there, because I think that really is what I like about Google bringing this to the forefront.
yeah,
Having been in digital marketing and early on web development for almost 20 odd years, some of this is what we used to consider with websites a long time ago. And then having worked in law firms, as you say, to go to the partnership and say, well, we need this budget to fix these issues. At least now Google is giving the graphs, it's giving the information, and it's giving some of the understanding behind how these will start to impact your website. I think it's important to remember, this is part of the wider picture of the security, the wider page speed as well. And these are core vitals. They're not going to be primary ranking factors, but they're going to be playing a big, big part. And when it comes down to the choice of two websites that are generally equally matched, if one has looked at sorting out issues with largest contentful paint and cumulative shift and the other hasn't, well, the one that has is going to be ranking higher. It's as simple as that. And then that goes back to trying to get into those first 3 spots on Google.
David, I really enjoyed the session. It's been really informative. Thank you. How do people get in touch with you if they want to pick up the conversation and hear some more details from you?
No problem. Well, I'm often on LinkedIn. You can type in David Sayce and I'll pop up. I'm on there quite a bit. Or go to my website, papergecko.com, or drop me an email at hello@papergecko.com. And I'm happy to answer questions and hear what you have to say.
Okay, well, thanks everyone for joining us today, and then for watching the video afterwards, maybe for this first ever BD Roundtable to be hosted from Europe. I hope you've enjoyed the content. I'll be in touch with some more details as to who we're going to hear from next. And David, thank you again so much for today. We'll be sharing this video online and on David's favorite platform, LinkedIn, obviously, over the next few days or weeks. And we will be in touch with the upcoming webinars as well. Thank you. Cheers.